I never thought I'd be the kind of person to withhold money from my own children. For 43 years I'd been their safety net, their bank, their unconditional supporter. I'd funded college tuitions, wedding deposits, business ventures, down payments on houses, emergency medical bills, and countless, just this once request that somehow became a monthly occurrence. I never asked for repayment. I never demanded gratitude. I simply loved them, and in my mind that's what mothers did. But on a warm September evening, standing outside my son Daniel's dining room window, I heard 3 words that shattered everything I believed about my role in their lives. She's just a burden. The statement hung in the air like poison. I'd arrived early for our monthly family dinner, excited because I just received news that my investment portfolio had performed exceptionally well. I was planning to surprise them with an announcement that I'd be helping Daniel with his dream restaurant venture and funding my daughter Patricia's husband's medical practice expansion. $20,000 for Daniel, $30,000 for Patricia and James. I'd spent weeks with my financial advisor, restructuring my retirement accounts to make it work. I was so proud, so eager to see their faces light up. But as I approached the front door, I heard their voices through the open window. They were laughing, the sound of wine glasses clinking, completely unaware I was outside. "Honestly, I don't know how much longer we can keep doing these dinners," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when complaining about inconveniences. "It's exhausting. Pretending everything she says is fascinating when she just repeats the same stories." My hand froze on the doorbell. "Tell me about it," Daniel replied. "And she always needs something. A ride here, help with her phone there, questions about her bills. It's like having a child, except children eventually grow up." Their laughter cut through me like shattered glass. "She's just a burden at this point," Patricia continued. "I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. We have our own lives, our own problems. I can't be her emotional support animal anymore. Or her personal IT department," Daniel added. "Last week, she called me 3 times about her email password. 3 times. I have a business to run." I stood there completely paralyzed. The envelope in my purse, the one containing the bank draft for Daniel's restaurant fund, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Do you think she has any idea how much time we spend managing her?" Patricia asked. "Between the phone calls and the visits and these dinners, it's probably 10 hours a week." "That's a part-time job." "A job that doesn't pay," James chimed in. I'd always liked James. Apparently that feeling wasn't mutual. "At least when this is all over, there'll be the inheritance to show for it. Your mother's been smart with money, I'll give her that." My stomach turned. The inheritance. They were waiting for me to die so they could have my money. "James." Patricia laughed, but it wasn't a shocked laugh. It was amused. "You can't say things like that." "Why not? We're all thinking it. Your mother is 72, sitting on a very comfortable nest egg, and spending her time bothering us about nonsense instead of enjoying her retirement. When the time comes, at least we'll be set. Daniel can finally open that restaurant without needing a loan. I can expand the practice. We just have to wait it out." I didn't ring the doorbell. I walked back to my car with legs that barely held me up, got in and drove home in a daze. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I was somewhere in a hollow space where shock and devastation meet. That night I sat in my living room, the living room where I'd rocked both of them as babies, where I'd helped them with homework, where I'd celebrated their achievements, and I forced myself to review my entire relationship with my children through this new horrible lens. I'd been a widow for 18 years. When Richard died, Daniel was 24 and Patricia was 21. They'd both been devastated, but no one had been more lost than me. Richard and I had been married for 33 years. He'd been my partner, my best friend, my entire world. The grief had been crushing, but I'd survived it because I had to. I had children who still needed me, even as adults. Or so I'd thought. I'd retired from teaching that same year. Richard's life insurance and our combined savings meant I was comfortable financially, though certainly not wealthy. But I was careful. I invested wisely. I lived modestly. I made my money work for me because I wanted to be able to help my children when they needed it. And they needed it often. Daniel had needed $15,000 for his culinary school tuition because he'd decided at 26 that his business degree wasn't fulfilling. I'd paid it without hesitation. Patricia had needed $18,000 when she and James bought their first house and came up short on the down payment. I'd written the check the same day. When Daniel's first restaurant attempt failed after 2 years, leaving him $40,000 in debt, I'd paid $30,000 of it so he could start fresh without bankruptcy destroying his credit. When Patricia had struggled with infertility treatments, I'd covered $12,000 in medical expenses that insurance wouldn't touch. I'd never considered any of it a burden. I'd considered it love. I considered it what parents do. But as I sat there that night reviewing every interaction through this new perspective, I began to see patterns I'd been blind to. The phone calls where they sounded impatient. The visits that were always rushed. The way they'd exchange glances when I told stories they'd heard before. The subtle sighs when I asked for help with technology one genuinely didn't understand. The times they canceled plans with barely an excuse. The holidays where I sensed I was an obligation rather than a joy. How long had they felt this way? How long had I been blind to my own children's contempt? I'd asked Daniel for help with my email 3 times that week, because I'd been locked out of my account, and the security questions weren't working. I thought he'd be happy to help his mother with a simple problem. Instead, I'd been an irritation, a burden, an unpaid job. I called Patricia frequently because I was lonely, because I missed having someone to talk to about daily life, because my daughter had always been my closest confidant. Or so I'd believed. Apparently, I'd been her emotional burden, her child who wouldn't grow up. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. The hurt was still there, a constant ache in my chest, but beneath it was something I hadn't felt in years, anger. Not the explosive, destructive kind, but the cold, focused variety that drives action. I had been planning to give them $50,000 of my carefully saved money. Money I'd accumulated through decades of careful planning and smart investments. Money that represented my security, my independence, my future care if I ever needed it. I'd been prepared to diminish my own safety net to fund their dreams, while they sat around drinking wine and discussing what a burden I was. That wasn't going to happen. But I wasn't going to confront them either. Not yet. I'd learned something valuable standing outside that window. When people don't know you're listening, they tell you exactly who they are. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full extent of their feelings before I decided how to respond. So I did something I'd never done before. I started paying attention in a different way. I started watching my children the way you'd watch strangers, without the filtering lens of maternal love and assumption of goodness. That Sunday, I called Patricia and asked if she wanted to meet for lunch, our usual monthly tradition. There was the briefest pause before she agreed. And in that pause, I heard reluctance I'd never noticed before. We met at the cafe we'd been going to for years. I watched as she checked her phone 6 times during our salad course. I'd always assumed she was busy, important, in demand. Now I wondered if she was just bored. "How are the kids?" I asked, referring to her 2 teenagers, my grandchildren whom I adored. "Fine. Busy with school." She didn't elaborate. She used to tell me everything about them. Every achievement, every struggle, every funny thing they said. When had she stopped? "I'd love to have them over for dinner soon," I said. "It's been weeks since I've really spent time with them." "They're so busy with activities, Mom. You know how it is." I did know. But I also knew that they found time for James's parents every other weekend. I'd seen the photos on Facebook. I'd simply never let myself examine why my grandchildren were too busy for me, but not for their other grandparents. "How's work?" I asked. "Stressful. The firm is demanding. I'm handling 3 major cases right now." She said it with the air of someone who wanted credit for being busy, as if I should be impressed by her unavailability. "That sounds challenging," I said. "I'm proud of how successful you've become." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I decided to test something. I've been thinking about downsizing. The house is getting to be a lot to maintain." Her attention sharpened immediately. "Downsizing? To what? An apartment? Maybe. Or a smaller house. I'd probably clear a good profit on the sale." I watched as calculations flickered across her face. "That seems drastic. You love that house." "I do, but it's a lot of space for one person. And the equity could be useful for my retirement, give me more flexibility. You should talk to James before making any big financial decisions," she said quickly. "He's really good with money management." I bet he was. Especially when it came to managing my money into his pocket eventually. I'll keep that in mind, I said. The rest of lunch was painful. Every word felt like a performance. She was performing interest in my life. I was performing ignorance of her true feelings. We were two actors in a play neither of us wanted to be in, except I was the only one who knew we were acting. The following Tuesday I called Daniel. I told him I'd been sick the night of the family dinner, apologizing for missing it. "Oh, no problem, Mom," he said, his voice casual. "We missed you." It was such an easy lie. They hadn't missed me. They'd probably been relieved. I was really looking forward to it. I continued. I actually had some news I wanted to share. "Oh yeah? What's that?" "My investment portfolio has done really well this quarter. I was thinking about how to use some of the returns." The change in his tone was immediate. "That's great, Mom. You've always been smart with money. What are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe travel? I've always wanted to see Italy." "Italy?" He sounded almost panicked. "That's so far, Mom. And expensive. Wouldn't you rather do something more practical?" "Practical? Like funding his restaurant dream, perhaps?" "You might be right," I said. "I'll think about it. Actually, Mom, since you mentioned money, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Here it was. I found the perfect location for a restaurant. The lease is incredible, the space is ideal, and I have this whole concept planned out. Italian-American fusion, upscale casual. It's going to be amazing. But I need about $20,000 for the build-out and initial inventory. $20,000. The exact amount I've been planning to give him. "Have you applied for a business loan?" I asked. "Banks are hesitant because of the previous restaurant. But Mom, I've learned so much from that experience. This time will be different. I have a business plan, market research, everything. I just need the initial capital." "That's a lot of money, Daniel." "I know, but think of it as an investment. You'd be part of something amazing. When the restaurant succeeds, and it will, I'll pay you back with interest." He'd never paid me back before. Not once. Not even partially. But he'd always had reasons. The first restaurant failing. Emergency expenses. Life happening. There was always something. "Let me think about it," I said. "Think fast," he pressed. "The opportunity won't wait forever. There are other investors interested in the space." Investors? As if I was a bank and not his mother, whom he'd called a burden 4 days earlier. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. This was the son I'd raised, the boy I'd nursed through illnesses and cheered at soccer games and helped with heartbreaks. This was the man I'd sacrificed for repeatedly, who'd never paid me back a single dollar, who'd called me a burden while planning to ask me for $20,000. I spent the next week doing research. I wanted to understand exactly what my financial situation was and what it would be if I gave away $50,000. I met with my financial advisor, Margaret, who'd been managing my portfolio for a decade. "You want to withdraw $50,000? She asked, her expression concerned. "Edith, that's a significant portion of your liquid assets. What's this for?" "My children need help with some ventures." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "I'm going to speak to you as a friend, not just an advisor. You're 72. You're healthy now, but healthcare costs rise dramatically as we age. Your current portfolio is structured to provide you with comfortable living expenses and a cushion for unexpected costs. If you withdraw $50,000, you're reducing your security significantly. But I'd still have enough for my needs, right? For basic needs, yes. But what about the things that make life enjoyable? Travel? Hobbies? Helping yourself if you need care later? Right now you have options. Taking out $50,000 reduces those options considerably. What if I needed care?" I asked. "Long-term care? Nursing home?" Margaret pulled up some calculations on her computer. "With your current assets, you could afford high-quality assisted living or nursing home care for approximately 8 to 10 years before depleting your savings. Without that $50,000, you're looking at 5 to 6 years of the same quality, or you'd need to downgrade to more basic facilities." The reality hit me hard. I'd been prepared to reduce my own future security, potentially my own comfort and care in my final years, to fund my children's dreams while they complained about what a burden I was. "What would you recommend?" I asked. Keep your money, Margaret said firmly. Your children are adults. They have careers. If they need funding, they can get loans or find investors. You've already helped them extensively. You've told me about the previous amounts you've given them. Edith, you've been extraordinarily generous. It's okay to prioritize your own security now. I nodded slowly. What if I wanted to restructure things? Set up trusts. Make sure my estate is handled exactly as I want. We can absolutely do that. Do you have specific intentions? Not yet, I said. But I will soon. I left Margaret's office with a new understanding. Every dollar I gave to my children was a dollar I wouldn't have for my own care, my own comfort, my own life. They were asking me to sacrifice my future while considering me a burden in their present. The mathematics of it was cruel but clear. That evening Patricia called. Mom, James and I want to take you to dinner this weekend. Are you free Saturday? This was unusual. They rarely invited me to anything without it being a holiday or obligation. That sounds lovely. What's the occasion? No occasion. We just want to spend time with you. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I wondered how many times they'd lied to me and I'd simply believe them because they were my children. Saturday came. We went to an expensive steakhouse, the kind of place you go when you want to impress someone or soften them up for something. James ordered an expensive bottle of wine. Patricia was unusually attentive, asking about my week, laughing at my stories. It was during dessert that James brought up the real reason for the dinner. Edith, Patricia mentioned you might be thinking about downsizing. I've considered it, I said carefully. Before you make any major decisions, I'd like to offer my services. As your son-in-law and as a medical professional, I see a lot of elderly patients struggling with financial and housing decisions. I'd hate to see you make a choice you'd regret. Elderly. He called me elderly like it was a diagnosis. I appreciate that, James. The thing is, Patricia and I have been thinking. Our house is quite large. We have that entire basement suite that's just sitting empty. What if you moved in with us? You'd have your own space, family nearby, built-in help with anything you need. And you could sell your house, invest the money, have even more security. I stared at him. Move in with them? Live in their basement like a dependent relative? I'd heard enough through that window to know exactly how welcome I'd actually be. That's a very generous offer, I said slowly. Patricia jumped in. We've been talking about it a lot, Mom. You're not getting any younger, and we worry about you being alone in that big house. What if something happens? What if you fall? Having you with us means we can make sure you're safe and cared for. Safe and cared for. Like I was already incompetent, already helpless. And honestly, James continued, with the equity in your house, you'd have substantial funds we could invest properly for you. I have some excellent contacts in wealth management. You could be making much more on your money than you probably are now. There it was. They wanted my house. They wanted control of my money. And they wanted me dependent on them, living in their basement, a burden they could manage and control while they waited for their inheritance. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, Patricia said, reaching over to pat my hand. But don't take too long. The housing market is very good right now. If you're going to sell, this is the time. That night I went home and I cried. Not quiet tears but deep wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for the mother I'd been, who'd loved unconditionally and given freely. I cried for the children I'd thought I had, who I'd believed loved me the same way. I cried for the betrayal, for the lies, for the calculations behind every smile. But when I was done crying, I was also done being a victim. I'd spent my entire adult life being someone who gave, to my students, to my husband, to my children. I'd defined myself by my service to others, by how much I could help, by how much I could love. And somewhere along the way my children had learned that they could take without giving, that they could use without appreciating, that they could see me as a resource rather than a person. I taught them that. By never saying no. By never expecting reciprocity. By never demanding respect. I taught them that my value was in what I could provide, not in who I was. It was time to teach them something different. The next morning I called Margaret. I want to restructure my entire estate plan. Everything. And I want to do it in a way that protects my assets and ensures they're used exactly as I intend. We spent 3 hours going through every detail. She helped me set up a revocable living trust, which meant I maintained control of everything while I was alive but had clear directions for after. More importantly, we restructured my will entirely. Instead of leaving everything to Daniel and Patricia equally, I created specific provisions. My house would be sold, with the proceeds going to a charitable foundation I was establishing for elderly individuals in financial need. My investment portfolio would be used to fund scholarships for students who'd lost a parent, administered through my old school district. There were small bequests for my grandchildren's education, placed in trusts they'd receive at 25, but only if they maintained a relationship with me, defined specifically as monthly visits or calls, not just holiday obligations. For Daniel and Patricia, they'd each receive $10,000 and a letter explaining exactly why they weren't receiving more. Are you sure about this? Margaret asked. I'm not questioning your right to do whatever you want with your money, but this is a significant change. Have you considered talking to your children first? I've tried talking to them my whole life, I said. They've stopped listening. Maybe this will get their attention. But I wasn't done. I had the new will and trust documents, but I wanted to see exactly how far they'd go. I wanted to understand if there was any genuine love left, or if it had all been calculation and obligation for years. I called Daniel first. I've been thinking about your restaurant proposal. Mom, that's great. Did you talk to your financial advisor? I did. She had some concerns about the amount, but I explained how important this is to you. How important you are to me. So you'll do it? The eagerness in his voice was painful to hear. I will. But I need your help with something first. Anything, Mom. Of course. I've been struggling with some home repairs. The roof has a leak, the kitchen faucet keeps breaking, and I think there might be something wrong with the furnace. I called a handyman, but he quoted me almost $3,000. I was hoping you might know someone cheaper. Or maybe you could look at some of it yourself. You've always been so handy. The silence on the other end was telling. This weekend, he finally said. Mom, I'm really busy with the restaurant planning. Can't you just hire someone? I could, but $3,000 is a lot of money, especially if I'm also helping you with $20,000. I thought maybe we could save where we can. Right, but Mom, my time is worth money too. I need to focus on getting this restaurant off the ground. Once it's successful, I'll have plenty of time to help you with stuff like that. So you can't spare a few hours to help your mother with urgent home repairs? It's not that I can't, it's just that the timing is bad. Hire the handyman. Consider it an investment in your own safety. You don't want a leaky roof causing structural damage. But then I might not have the full $20,000 available. Another pause. How much would you have? Maybe $17,000. Mom. His voice took on a tone I'd never heard before. Something between frustration and desperation. I need the full amount. The lease requires first and last month's rent, plus the build-out costs. 17 isn't enough. Can't you put the repairs off a bit? Winter's not for another couple months. He wanted me to live with a leaky roof, a broken faucet, and a faulty furnace so he could have his restaurant. My safety and comfort were negotiable. His dreams were not. I'll figure something out, I said quietly. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. Once the restaurant is up and running, I promise I'll make it up to you. He'd been making that same promise for 20 years. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. I told her I was considering the offer to move in with them, but I was worried about the logistics of selling my house and moving. I'd need help sorting through everything, packing, organizing estate sales for furniture, coordinating with realtors. Feels overwhelming. Could you take some time off work to help me? Maybe a week or two. We could do it together. A week or two? She sounded genuinely shocked. Mom, I have 3 major cases right now. I can't just take off that much time. But we can hire people to do all of that. There are companies that specialize in estate sales and senior moves. Senior moves. Like I was already ancient and incompetent. That seems so impersonal, I said. I've lived in this house for 45 years. Every item has a memory. I thought you might want to be part of it, maybe take some things for yourselves, go through old photos together. We can still do that, Mom. But not for 2 straight weeks. I'll come over a few Saturdays and we can go through things together. The professionals can handle the heavy lifting. But if I sell the house, I'll need help finding the right buyers, negotiating, understanding all the paperwork. James said you'd help me invest the money properly. That's a lot of work. That's what we have professionals for. Realtors, financial advisors, lawyers. Mom, you're acting like you need constant hand-holding. You're a smart woman. You taught for 30 years. You can handle some paperwork with the right professionals. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was smart enough to handle complex paperwork but too burdensome to spend time with. I was capable when they needed me to be, incompetent when it suited their narrative. I suppose you're right, I said. Look, I know this is a big transition, but it's for the best. You'll be so much happier with us and we'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about a thing. Except living in their basement while they resented my presence and counted down the days until my inheritance. I had my answer. Both of them. They wanted my money, my house, my assets. But they didn't want to give me their time, their attention, or their genuine care. I was an ATM that occasionally required maintenance, an investment they were managing until it paid out. The next day, I invited both of them to lunch at my house. I told them I had important news to share. They arrived within minutes of each other, both looking eager. They thought I was going to announce the money, the move, all of it. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd celebrated their birthdays, comforted them through heartbreaks, and supported them through every crisis. The same room where they'd grown up feeling loved and secure, never questioning whether their mother would be there for them. I've made some decisions, I began. About my finances, about my living situation, about my future. They leaned forward, attentive in a way they hadn't been in years. I've decided not to downsize. I'm staying in this house. It's my home, and I'm not ready to leave it. Patricia's face fell slightly. But Mom, we talked about how much better it would be. I held up my hand. I've also decided not to make any large financial gifts in the near future. Daniel, I won't be funding your restaurant. Patricia, James, I won't be contributing to the medical practice expansion. The silence was deafening. What? Daniel found his voice first. Mom, I thought we agreed. You thought I agreed. I never actually committed. And I've realized that at 72, I need to prioritize my own financial security. My advisor helped me understand that giving away large sums now could jeopardize my ability to care for myself later. But the restaurant, Daniel started, can be funded through business loans, investors, or your own savings. The same way other people start businesses. Patricia's eyes had narrowed. Mom, this isn't like you. Who's been talking to you? Your financial advisor? Because I really think you should get a second opinion from James before making these kinds of decisions. James doesn't get to make my financial decisions. Neither do you. My money is mine to manage as I see fit. Of course it is, James said smoothly. We're just concerned. You seemed excited about helping Daniel with the restaurant. What changed? I looked at all three of them, these people who thought I was too stupid or senile to understand what they really wanted. I've had a lot of time to think lately. About my life, about my relationships, about what I want for my remaining years. Your remaining years? Patricia's voice rose. Mom, you sound like you're dying. You're healthy. You could live another 20 years. Exactly. Another 20 years. That's a long time to be dependent on people who see you as a burden. The room went very still. What are you talking about? Daniel asked, but his voice was careful now. 3 weeks ago, I arrived early for family dinner at your house, Daniel. I overheard a very interesting conversation through your dining room window. The color drained from Patricia's face. Daniel looked like he might be sick. I heard Patricia say I'm just a burden. I heard you, Daniel, complain about being my personal IT department. I heard James discuss my inheritance like it's compensation for tolerating me while I'm alive. I heard all of it. Mom, Patricia started, but I wasn't finished. For 3 weeks I've watched you. Both of you. Testing whether there was any genuine care left, or if it was all just calculation. Daniel, you wouldn't spare a few hours to help me with home repairs, but you expected $20,000. Patricia, you wouldn't take time off to help me through a major life transition. But you wanted me to sell my house and move into your basement where you could manage my money and my life. You're taking things out of context, Patricia said, her lawyer training kicking in. That conversation was just venting. Everyone vents about their parents sometimes. It doesn't mean we don't love you. Really? Because I can't recall the last time either of you did something for me that didn't benefit you in some way. When was the last time you called just to talk, not because you needed something? When was the last time you visited without it being an obligation or a setup for asking me for money? The silence answered for them. You want to know what's really sad? I continued. I was excited that day. I just learned my investments had performed well, and I couldn't wait to tell you that I was giving Daniel $20,000 and Patricia and James $30,000. I'd spent weeks planning it, restructuring my accounts, so excited to help you achieve your dreams. I was standing outside your door with that money essentially in my hand, and you were inside calling me a burden and discussing my inheritance. We didn't mean it, Daniel said, but his voice was hollow. Yes, you did. And that's actually okay. You're entitled to your feelings. But I'm entitled to my money and my choices. So here's what's going to happen. I'm keeping my house. I'm keeping my money. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it, without prioritizing your needs above my own security. This is unbelievable, Patricia said, her face flushed. After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me? I asked calmly. Specifically, what have you actually done? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't think of anything. You've shown up at mandatory gatherings. You've answered phone calls with barely concealed impatience. You've helped me with technology while sighing about how burdensome it is. Meanwhile, I've given you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. I paid for educations, weddings, business ventures, houses, medical procedures, emergency funds. I've been your safety net your entire lives. And the moment I needed to know I could rely on you for basic support and companionship, you failed. So that's it. Daniel's voice was sharp now, anger replacing shock. You're punishing us because you overheard one conversation? I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. By cutting us off completely? Patricia demanded. I'm not cutting you off. I'm simply not funding your optional ventures with money I need for my own security. You're both successful adults with good careers. You don't need my money. You want it. There's a difference. James stood up. This is emotional manipulation. You're using money to control them, to punish them for one moment of frustration. No, James. You wanted to use money to control me. You wanted me in your basement dependent on you with my assets under your management. That's control. I'm simply maintaining my independence. What about family? Patricia asked, and for the first time she looked genuinely distressed. Are you just going to cut us out of your life? That depends on you. I'm not the one who called you a burden. I'm not the one who complained about spending time with you. I'm not the one waiting for you to die so I can inherit your money. All of that was you. So you tell me, do you actually want a relationship with your mother? Or do you want a relationship with her bank account? That's not fair, Daniel said. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I've given you everything, sacrificed my own comfort repeatedly, never asked for anything in return except basic respect and affection. And you gave me contempt and calculation instead. Don't lecture me about fair. They left shortly after, angry and shocked. Patricia slammed the door. Daniel didn't say goodbye. James gave me a look that was pure assessment, like he was calculating whether I was mentally competent or if there was a way to contest my decisions. Let them be angry. I'd spent 3 weeks being heartbroken. It was their turn. The next few weeks were quiet. Neither of them called. I didn't reach out either. I was grieving in a strange way, not for people who died, but for the relationship I'd thought I had with my children. That mother-child bond I'd believed was unbreakable had been revealed as conditional, transactional. But I wasn't alone in my grief. I joined a community center senior group, something I'd always been too busy for because I'd been prioritizing my children's needs. I met other women my age, many of whom had similar stories of ungrateful children and painful realizations. We became friends in a way I hadn't had friends in years. I started volunteering at a literacy program, using my teaching skills to help adult learners. It was fulfilling in a way I'd forgotten work could be. I was helping people who genuinely appreciated it, who thanked me, who valued my time and expertise. I took a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. I joined a book club, I started going to theater performances and art gallery openings. I was doing all the things I told myself I'd do someday. And someday had finally arrived. 6 weeks after our confrontation, Patricia called. "Mom, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "This isn't a conversation for the phone. Can I come over?" She arrived an hour later alone. She looked tired, older somehow. We sat in the living room again, but this time the energy was different. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About what you said. About everything." I waited. "You were right. About most of it. We did take you for granted. We did treat you like you were obligated to help us financially, while complaining about the small inconveniences of actually spending time with you." "Most of it?" I asked. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I still think you could have talked to us instead of just overhearing one conversation and making huge decisions based on it." "Patricia, that wasn't one isolated conversation. That was the truth you'd all been hiding. And I tested that truth afterward. Every interaction confirmed what I'd heard." She nodded slowly. "I know. I've been replaying every conversation we've had in the past year, and I can see it now. How dismissive I was. How transactional. Why?" I asked. "When did I become a burden instead of your mother?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know exactly. It wasn't one moment. It was gradual. You'd call, and I'd be in the middle of something. You'd need help, and it would be inconvenient timing. You'd tell the same stories, and I'd heard them before. Each time I'd feel a little more irritated. And somewhere along the way, irritation became the default instead of love. Did you ever love me? Or was I always just useful?" "Don't say that." Her eyes filled with tears. "Of course I love you. You're my mother. Love is supposed to be more than a title, Patricia. Supposed to be action, care, respect, time, attention. When did you last demonstrate any of that?" She couldn't answer. "I spent your entire childhood showing you what love looks like," I continued. "I was present. I was interested. I prioritized you. I sacrificed for you gladly. And somewhere along the way, you learned to take all of that for granted and give nothing back." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. Are you sorry I found out? Or sorry you did it?" She flinched. "Both probably. Is that honest enough?" It was actually. "What do you want, Patricia?" "I want to fix this. I want my mother back. I want my kids to have a grandmother who's actually in their lives. Not someone we see at holidays out of obligation. What are you willing to do to make that happen?" "Whatever it takes." I studied her face, looking for sincerity or manipulation. I honestly couldn't tell. "I'm not funding James's practice expansion. That's not changing." "I know. I'm not asking you to. And I'm not moving into your basement or giving you control of my finances." "I understand. So what does whatever it takes actually mean?" She thought for a moment. "Actual visits. Not because it's a holiday or because we need something, but because I genuinely want to spend time with you. Real phone calls where I actually listen instead of half paying attention while checking my email. Bringing the kids over regularly so they can actually know you. Being patient when you need help with technology or whatever else, because that's what family does. And when I'm not convenient. When I call at a bad time or need something when you're busy. I'll still be busy sometimes, Mom. I can't promise I'll always be available immediately. But I can promise I'll make you a priority instead of an afterthought. I can promise I'll be honest about my availability instead of acting like spending time with you is a burden." It was a good answer. Whether she could follow through was another question entirely. "I need to see it, not just hear it," I said. "Words are easy. Actions matter." "I know. Give me a chance to show you." I wanted to believe her. The mother in me, the part that still loved my daughter despite everything, wanted to accept her apology and go back to how things were. But I couldn't go back. The person I'd been before, the one who gave unconditionally and never demanded reciprocity, she was gone. This new version of me knew her worth and wouldn't accept less than respect. "Okay," I finally said. "But I'm not the same person I was before, Patricia. I've built a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for my children to need me. I have activities, commitments, friends. You can be part of that life, but you're not going to be the center of it anymore." "That's fair," she said quietly. Over the following months, Patricia tried. She really did. She started coming over every other Saturday, spending actual time with me, not just quick obligatory visits. She brought my grandchildren more often. We had real conversations where she asked about my life and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes she'd cancel plans, and I'd see on social media that she'd done something else instead. Sometimes during our calls, I could hear the distraction in her voice. But she was trying, and I appreciated the effort even when it fell short. Daniel was a different story. He didn't call for 2 months after our confrontation. When he finally did, it was brief and angry. "I had to tell the landlord I couldn't take the restaurant space," he said without preamble. "I lost the opportunity because you decided to be petty." "I decided to prioritize my own financial security," I corrected. "That's not petty. That's sensible. You could have helped me. You have the money. Having money doesn't obligate me to give it to you, especially when you made it clear you see me as a burden." I apologized. "No, you didn't. You got angry that I wouldn't fund your restaurant. That's not the same as apologizing for how you spoke about me and treated me." He hung up. 3 more months passed before he called again, and only because Patricia had apparently been pushing him to reach out. The conversation was stiff, perfunctory. He asked how I was. I asked how he was. We both gave short, careful answers. Then he said he had to go. Baby steps, I told myself. But honestly, I wasn't sure Daniel and I would ever repair our relationship. Unlike Patricia, who seemed to genuinely want to reconnect, Daniel seemed to only want what I could provide. Without the money, he didn't see much point in me. That hurt. Still hurts. But I've learned to sit with the hurt instead of trying to fix it by giving more. A year after the confrontation, Margaret called me into her office. "Your portfolio has continued to perform well," she said. "You're in an excellent position financially. Have you thought any more about your long-term plans?" "I've been traveling," I said. "I went to Italy in the spring. I'm planning a trip to Ireland next month." "Good. You should enjoy your money. You've earned it." "I've also been thinking about the charitable foundation we discussed, for elderly people in financial need. Are you ready to set that up?" "Almost. I want to make sure my grandchildren's education trusts are solid first. And there's one more thing I want to do." I told her my plan. She smiled. "Edith, I think your children have no idea what they lost when they called you a burden." "They're starting to figure it out," I said. Last month, I invited both families to Sunday dinner at my house. It had been a year and a half since the confrontation. Patricia had been consistently present, actually building a real relationship. Daniel had been sporadic, still somewhat distant, but showing some effort. They arrived expecting a normal family dinner. Instead, I had a presentation prepared. "I want to show you what I've been doing with my time and money," I announced after we'd eaten. I pulled up photos on my laptop, casting them to the TV. Pictures of my trips to Italy, Ireland, Scotland. Pictures of the adult literacy program I volunteered with, my students proudly holding their certificates. Pictures of the community center senior group, all of us laughing at various outings and events. I've also established the Edith Richardson Foundation for Elder Financial Security. I continued. Last month we helped our first 3 recipients, elderly people who needed help with medical bills, home repairs, and basic living expenses. People who'd given everything to their families and found themselves without resources in their final years. Patricia looked stricken. She understood the implications immediately. "The foundation will be my primary legacy," I said. "It's endowed with the bulk of my estate. It will continue helping people long after I'm gone." "What about us?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "You'll each receive a small bequest, enough to be meaningful but not life-changing. The majority is going to help people who actually need it, rather than people who just want it." "You're giving our inheritance to strangers?" Daniel's face was red. "I'm giving my money to people I choose to help. It was never your inheritance. It was always my money." "This is revenge," he said. "This is punishment because we had one bad conversation." "No, Daniel. This is me using my resources to create something meaningful. Something that aligns with my values. If you'd shown me over the years that you valued me as a person and not just a wallet, maybe I'd have felt differently. But you didn't. So I don't." "You're a bitter old woman," he said, standing up. I'm a woman who knows her worth, I corrected. And I'm no longer willing to let people treat me poorly while I fund their dreams. He left. Again. This time I don't expect him to come back. Patricia stayed. So did James and the kids. After Daniel's departure, Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said quietly. Are you angry about the inheritance? A little, she admitted. But mostly I'm ashamed. Because you're right. We treated you like an ATM and complained when you had needs of your own. You deserved better. Do you want better now because you love me? Or because you're hoping I'll change my mind about the money? She smiled sadly. 6 months ago, probably the money. Now, I genuinely love having you back in my life. My kids adore you. I've missed you. The real you, not the version who just gave us everything we wanted. The real me has boundaries now, I said. And expectations. Good. You should. We're still rebuilding. It's not perfect. Sometimes I see flashes of the old Patricia, the one who saw me as convenient or inconvenient rather than as a person. But mostly I see someone trying to be better to do better. Daniel sent a long email 2 weeks ago. Half apology, half justification, all complicated. He wants to meet for coffee. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure I will. The truth is I don't need them anymore. Not the way I thought I did. For so many years my identity was wrapped up in being their mother, in being needed and useful. I thought that if I stopped being useful I'd stop mattering. But I matter to the literacy students I tutor. I matter to the elderly people the foundation helps. I matter to my book club and my cooking class and my travel companions. I matter to myself, which is something I'd forgotten how to do. And if my children want to be part of my life, they're welcome. But they're not the center anymore. They're not the sun I orbit around. They're supporting players in a life I'm living fully and joyfully, with or without them. Last week, I was at the community center when one of the other women, Gloria, asked me if I had any regrets. About my children? I asked. About all of it. Standing up for yourself, changing your will, choosing yourself. I thought about it for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary, I finally said. I regret that they didn't value me enough for me to never have to make these choices. But do I regret making them? Not for a second. Good, Gloria said firmly. You taught them an important lesson. That people aren't infinite resources. That love requires reciprocity. That you can't take and take and take and expect nothing to change. She was right. And whether my children actually learned that lesson or not, I learned something equally important. I am not a burden. I am a person with value, with needs, with boundaries. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve unlimited access to my time, my energy, or my money. I spent 72 years being someone who gave. Now I'm learning to be someone who receives. Joy, respect, genuine connection. And I'm learning to be someone who says no. It's the best education I've ever given myself. 3 days ago, I met with Margaret again. We're expanding the foundation, setting up a scholarship program for students who've lost parents, just like I'd planned. We're creating something that will help hundreds of people over the coming decades. Your children could have been part of this, Margaret observed. If they'd approached it differently. They could have, I agreed. But they chose to see me as a burden and an inheritance instead of a person and a partner. They made their choice. I'm just honoring it. By living your best life? Exactly. That night Patricia called. Mom, I was thinking. Next month is your birthday. What if we did something special? Just you and me and the kids? No James, no obligations. Maybe a weekend trip somewhere. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Progress isn't perfect. Rebuilding isn't linear. But it's happening slowly with the child who was willing to do the work. As for Daniel, maybe someday he'll understand. Maybe he'll realize that a relationship with his mother is worth more than a restaurant investment. Or maybe he won't. Either way, I'm okay. Because I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not hoping for them to see my value. I know my value. And I'm living accordingly. They whispered. She's just a burden. I whispered back. Then I won't fund your dream. And then I stopped whispering and started living.